What's up, guys? Welcome to the Powerline Podcast. I'm the founder and host of this podcast. My name is Ryan Lucas. I thank you guys for joining me today. If you are a first-time listener, thanks for joining, man. This is dope. I'm glad that you're here. Thanks for joining in. If you're a longtime listener and follower, I appreciate you. I thank you so much for your support. All right, jumping right in. Working Athlete and Powerline Podcast have teamed up to give you guys an exclusive deal on all Working Athlete and Wilderness Athlete products. These are supplements of the highest quality. And man, I've been taking these things for, probably 3 months now. And just they're a company that's doing things for us. That's what I really love about them. Not only are they doing things for us, the workers, the blue collar workers in the industry, the outdoors men and women, but they're also using the most highest quality ingredients in their products. I love their stuff. Give it a try. If you want to try their stuff out, get on wildernessathlete.com or workingathlete.com and use the code Powerline Podcast at checkout for 20% off. That's Powerline Podcast at checkout for 20% off. Make sure you use the code. It's been brought to my attention that some of you out there are buying their stuff and not getting the discount, not using the code. So use the code Powerline Podcast at checkout for 20% off all Wilderness Athlete and Working Athlete products. All right. The DDIN Tri-Clamp is an innovative tool that accelerates pad-to-pad connections by as much as 65%. The Tri-Clamp is patented multi-plane clamp that cradles bolts securely in accordance with NEMA spacing and then clasps itself to the mounting pad and the connecting jumper. A starter socket holds the nut, lock washer, and washer in alignment simultaneously, enabling the lineman to safely seat all three onto their corresponding bolt in one motion. The Tri-Clamp is available at Tallman Equipment, 870 Supply, and anywhere that sells DDIN products. To see the Tri-Clamp in action, go to ddin.net. If you're looking for a lineman's tools and equipment in Canada, look no further than Line Star Utility Supply. Line Star's got you covered from coast to coast with all the gear that you need. They also offer warranty and repair facilities at each location. Line Star has now become a stocking distributor for Working Athlete products, so you can head on over directly to linestar.ca to get some of that Working Athlete goodness. So check them out at linestar.ca. So I brought back Dave Fossa to talk to us about grounding and bonding, and we're just going to have a conversation about it again, guys. So I want to highlight that this episode, the bulk of this episode, is all about grounding and bonding. And it's a topic that needs to be talked about more. It needs to be studied more, and we need to learn about it. As linemen, we need to learn more about what's actually going on. So everything in this episode is just a conversation. Neither Dave and I are telling you guys to go and perform work in this way. We just want to start getting you thinking about grounding and bonding again. Start asking your leadership these questions and start diving into it. Start doing the math, start working it out, and start really considering some of the things that we're talking about in this episode. So just a disclaimer, we're not telling you to go and perform work this way. All right? This is not us telling you to do that. This is us having a conversation and talking about grounding and bonding and talking about grounding and bonding issues, talking about theories, talking about just talking about the subject overall so that you guys can start thinking differently about it. Start thinking differently about the work methods that you're performing every day when you're working on de-energized lines. Because in a lot of ways, working energized and working hot is a lot safer, a hell of a lot safer than working on de-energized lines. All right, so let's jump right into the episode. I hope you enjoy this. I hope you get a ton of value from this conversation. I know I sure enjoyed it. So here we go. Dave Fossa on grounding and bonding. Dave Fossa, welcome to, you've been on the show, 3 times now? So for anybody listening, welcoming back Dave. He was on episode 2, which was the first real interview episode I had, episode 15 and episode 35. It's been about a year since you've been on the show, and I'm stoked to talk to you again. We don't talk as much as we used to, and I kind of miss that. So it's good to talk to you. Good to have you on the show again. Welcome here.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. It's good to talk to you again too. We still keep in touch. It's just our schedules are different employers now, or different sub-employer anyway. So
yeah,
change is good, right?
How's the farm?
Good. I was just out forming up for some concrete today. The garlic's coming up. Cattle aren't here yet. They'll be here in another probably 3 weeks. And there's, snow's gone. The ice is gone off the pond, off the slough. So the birds are all back. So that's kind of cool.
So you're full on into spring.
Oh yeah. I didn't want to. I was off last week helping a guy study, right? And I was like, it was so beautiful too. We smoked like 3 briskets and a pork shoulder, pork ribs, the whole 9 yards. I think we had the smoker going 4 nights of the 6 he was here.
That's awesome.
So
I know I've been hitting up a little bit of barbecue here in Texas. I've been, first off, so fortunate to be able to work down here right now. I don't know what your feeling is. I guess you kind of exclude yourself to the farm, but you still get around and travel a little bit. Just Canada seems to have lost its friggin' mind lately. I'm not too impressed with a lot of the stuff happening.
I think, you know what, you're not alone. It's gone far too far left.
Yeah.
And the expenditures, everybody seems to be buying into the spending of more money. I don't know. I agree with you totally. I'm tired of it's going down the wrong path, but
it's hard not to get, it's getting to the point where like, I try to keep politics away from this show, and it's not something I'm extremely educated on, but it is definitely something I pay attention to. And it's really extremely scary, the direction that Canada is going right now. And I was talking to my dad the other night, just actually last night, just telling him, I think I realized how my distant relatives felt when they made the decision to venture from Europe to Canada, or to the West, in hopes of something a little bit better. I'm feeling that myself right now. I do not feel internally comfortable with the direction of our country in the foreseeable future. I don't feel, I have 3 kids kind of just coming up in it, and I don't see a future there for them. And it scares me to death. So I'm fortunate enough to be working in Texas right now for a good company and a good place. And I really like the way Texas is right now. That's for sure. It's totally different.
Same with me. I totally like the entire culture down there in Texas. It would suit me fine, but it's pretty hard at my age, right? I'm getting close to just retiring, and I have a lot of emotional capital invested in this property, right? So it's at my age, my later 50s, there's no way I'm pulling up stakes. Because it would take me 10 or 15 years to get another place up the way I wanted it, and then I'm going to kick the bucket anyway, right? So or getting close.
So I was looking at opportunities for my children too, and just going like, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know. Been heavily thinking about it, about pursuing a different place.
So Glenn, I know I was talking with my buddy Glenn, and he's the same way, right? So,
yeah. What have you been doing to keep yourself busy? Just working hard on the farm, and then just doing what you can in the Powerline industry still. When are you going to retire?
Yeah. Well, I'm still working on that. I'm thinking, I've been talking with them about, part-time or 1 week on, 1 week off kind of thing. So we'll see how that works out. I don't want to give up on this. I feel like I've got too much to contribute, too much time to support. And one of the things that happens when and I think I was telling you about this is, when you get into a position where you're the person that people go to for questions, or when they have questions, you're the person they go to for answers. that person learns something and you learn something.
Yeah.
And then another person asks and you learn a second thing. And then the cascade happens. And before you know it, I'm not smarter than anybody else. I'm not saying that, but it's just because of what I'm exposed to on a daily, weekly basis, the gap in knowledge or the knowledge that you accumulate relative to if I was back on the tools, it's considerably larger, right?
That's why like I encourage questioning. I'm finding very similar thing. Like you get challenged with a question and you're supposed to be the person that knows something about it. And even if you don't, it challenges you to figure out what that answer is so that you can deliver something back to these people, some sort of value back to them. That's what I'm finding. And it does make you grow at like almost like an exponential rate.
Yeah. The gap in knowledge, it is an exponential gap, or it increases exponentially, right? Like every time I get a question from the field, like, and where I work at Alltech, I think, we range between 250 to 300 employees out in the field, right? And so, you get these questions coming in all the time, and you keep. If I don't know the answer, I have to look it up. I have to find it. And when I do find it, I learn something else, right? And I share what I can, but that's not always one of the most practical things to do, right? So yeah. It is what it is, But I enjoy what I do. I feel like I'm still valued. I still provide value for the guys. I don't want to be one of those guys that walks off the edge of a cliff and says, "Oh, I'm done," right? So I want to stay.
Not right now. That the tides have turned. I remember seeing on your whiteboard the date that has come and gone. Was it April 29th or something?
Yeah, it was actually March 31st.
There you go.
And so right now it's just kind of we're working through some we're having discussions on what it would look like going forward.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to stay connected with Alltech. I really like the organization. I want to stay connected to the trade and to the various entities, and being with Alltech, being part of Quanta, it just gives you such a much larger base from which to work, right? To learn. Just what is Quanta now? 36 or 40,000? Between 36 and 40,000 employees.
Yeah,
right?
It's massive.
That's a huge organization, and
there's lots of stuff happening all the time. That's the thing, right? And like you just said, like if you want to grow exponentially, like there's things being fired at you nonstop. Like it's open access to resources. Some of the best in the industry, you have access to ask questions yourself if you don't know the answers, and work through problems and figure things out. And it's great. So one of the topics that last time you're on, it was probably about a year ago now. I think it was a little ways into COVID. We just we're figuring things out. I think it was last April or May. You're on with Dwayne March, and we talked at length. I think it was about an hour and a half, if not more, about grounding and bonding. And it was a great episode. I remember learning a lot from that and being challenged a lot and thought. And I know that I got a lot of feedback from the people listening. It was just a different way. I think it was presented, grounding and bonding was presented in a way that I don't think a lot of people think about it like that. And I know a lot of guys were like, I was trying to listen to this in my car, and I don't know. It was hard to put all the pieces of the puzzle together because it was a real thinker. And then they would go re-listen to it, come back at me and say, "Hey, that was a really great episode. It really got me thinking differently about grounding and bonding." So it's been about a year now, and it's still a topic that I just did a week here with pre-apprentices on grounding and bonding, and the questions that come from these guys, because they've already been in the field for 6 months, a year, and they're like, "Well, that's not how the people that are with me do it, and they do it like this." And I'm just like, oh man, there's so much to clear up out there. There's so much. It's like one of those topics that's like, there's so much old school, like I want to call it old school mentality, or things that have been done for like for instance, bracket grounding. We'll just throw the term out there right now. Well, this is the way we've done it for 30 years and I'm still here to talk about it. And it's like, okay, great. You managed to survive 30 years. That's awesome. Congratulations. That's not the way to do it. And if you take 5 seconds to just, sit down and talk with somebody that could talk you through the actual math on it, you'll see that it's different if we even start there. So I don't know where you want to start, but let's dive into ground.
Yeah, sure. I think, I guess bracket grounding is a good segue into this whole thing, right? So we always talk about grounding is for system protection and bonding is for worker protection. And I agree to a certain extent, but I think there's a number of things happening at the same time, right? We ground, we throw up a set of trip grounds. The purpose of the trip grounds is to trip the protection as fast as possible so that we can do the least amount of damage to the equipment in the field, right?
Right.
But don't kid yourself. The high-speed fault clearing, in other words, tripping the faster you can trip the protection, the better it is for the worker as well. Now, the worker still has to bond their work zone, but for me, I want the guys to always consider the impedance of the worker circuit. We call it an equal potential zone, but it's not. It really isn't. We call it that because the differentials are so extremely high, right? The impedance path around the worker. So you have your bonds going around you to your feet. That the impedance of that circuit is extremely low. And the impedance in the worker circuit is high. But you don't kid yourself. You are always a parallel path to ground. Always. Think, if you want to use a substation, then we should start at the substation, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that a substation does is they have a big ground grid underneath the station. Okay. And then all the supports, all the structures, the fence, the gates, the barbed wire across the top, everything is bonded to the station grid. Okay.
Yep.
Why? It's the purpose of that is to lower the impedance to ground of all the equipment. But if you're standing up against that column, you are still a parallel path, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go up to the A-frame. So you got an A-frame. I'm leaning up against the A-frame and a set of 230 insulators coming in flash over. Where's it going to flash over to? It flashes over to ground through the A-frame that's supporting the 230 as it comes into the sub. I'm standing in the sub. I am another path through my hands to my feet, right?
Yep.
So even though the substation is an equal potential zone, I am still another path. So what do they do in the substations to improve or make it safer for the worker? They put a foot of 3/4 crush insulating rock. It's usually a spec rock. And that increases the impedance to ground, which is the ground grid, for anybody inside the sub.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I get it.
Then,
I'm tracking.
What's that?
I'm tracking. I'm following.
Yeah. So now I've got a foot of gravel beneath me, insulating rock, which has now increased the impedance in my path.
Yep.
Right. I'm leaning up against the column. I'm a certain amount of resistance. I've got a huge resistance beneath my feet to the ground grid. So the steel is attached to the grid.
Yep.
I'm standing on the grid, but I'm still that parallel path. The only thing that's happened with the gravel is the impedance in my circuit, my parallel path, has increased. Let me ask you this. If I put a rubber glove on Say I'm standing there and I put a rubber glove on and I'm leaning up against it. Am I now even safer? I'm a lot safer because the impedance of that rubber glove is considerably higher.
Gotcha.
Right?
You're just adding more.
That's right. Yeah. So that's one of the things that happens in a substation, right? Those are my thoughts. So why don't we apply the same principles out in the field? It's all about the differential in impedance. We want as high an impedance in the worker circuit and as low an impedance as possible around us. And that's why we put our pole bands or cluster bracket or, well, I mean, I've heard so many different names for that.
You got it. I think everyone will follow cluster. You said something at the beginning though. You talked about the trip grounds or your main grounds being just as important for the worker as it is for the equipment or something along those lines.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's a new concept because we've continually been told lately that grounds and even their name, trip grounds, are just for system equipment. They're not for worker protection. So explain what you mean by they might be for protection.
Okay. The main purpose is to protect the system, to open up that breaker or that recloser as fast as possible. So the amount of damage done to the system is as little or as small as possible, right?
Sure.
So, does that help us? Well, yes, it does. So there's a couple of guys that have done some studies on high-speed fault clearing. And they've also done some studies on the human body and what it takes to put the human heart into defib. And I wish, you know what, can I share screens with you?
Yeah, you have to explain it as you share it though, because the listeners might not be able to see. They might not. They might not watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, maybe I won't do it then. Maybe another time we'll figure out a different way of doing it. But basically, there's a couple of guys named Beaglemeyer and Lee. They put together. I've read a bunch of papers on what it takes to put the electrical current that it takes to put the human heart into defib. And one of the things that they talk about at length is the time of exposure that the human heart is exposed to that lethal dose of electricity or current, right? So,
okay.
And as it turns out, the amount of time you need to be exposed to the lethal amount of current is actually the length of a heartbeat. And when you think about it, that makes total sense.
Right.
Because what is it that's driving our heart is electrical impulses.
Yep.
And if you want to throw a fuck into your heart, expose it to a certain amount of current for the length of it, your heart beats in a cycle.
Yep.
Right. So your resting heart beats about, if you're reasonable shape, it's about 60 beats a minute. And I would say if you're climbing a pole, you're working in a bucket. If you're just working, I would argue it's 120 beats a minute.
Yep.
Everybody's got these iWatches now. You can probably check while you're in the bucket. Yep. I'd like to see some feedback from some of the guys who's got the watches and, they're out there working away in the air. They're working on the hooks. I'd like to see what their heartbeats are at.
I was just checking it the other day. Actually, I was just looking at this like yesterday, and it was like a mid 90s. While doing some work, and it wasn't extremely strenuous work. I was just moving around, and it was
So mid-90s. The lower your heartbeat, the longer the longer the fault has to exist to hurt your heart, right? So I like to use 120 beats a minute.
So are you actually saying that you could, if by doing everything you can do with bonding and creating a high impedance, as well as making that time curve extremely fast or faster than a heartbeat, that all works together and that helps?
Yeah, it all works together. So, you know, here in our province, the utility that we have here, and it's a pretty big utility. It's about 1.5 times the size of all of Texas. And that's the utility that covers this province. Their standard breaker, it'll trip out in on 240 amps on imbalance, right? That's one phase, 240 amps on one phase more than another, right? So it trips out. Timed overload is 600 amps, but instantaneous. So this is a dead short, right? 4,800 amps. That's what a standard breaker that we use here at a substation, that's what it's designed to trip out at. Now, it takes 3 cycles for the breaker to operate and about 5 cycles for the relays and the protection when it sees that fault to trip out the breaker. So you're looking at about 8 cycles, maybe 10 if the fault current isn't as high as high, right? Because remember, we're talking an inverse time curve. Okay, the lower the fault current, the longer it takes for the protection to operate. In other words, the farther away you are from the substation, the longer that breaker takes to operate. It just sees load, right?
Roger.
So it brings to mind the importance of high-speed fault clearing, right? We want to trip that protection as fast as possible. And that actually supports bonding, right? It supports worker protection. Because if I'm exposed, just say hypothetically, I'm 120 beats a minute. That's 2 beats a second. Okay, that's 30 cycles per beat. If I can get the protection to operate much faster than 30 cycles, you know, that's what it's going to take. The length of a heartbeat is really what it takes to kill you. If I can get that protection to operate much faster than my heartbeat, I've got a much better chance of survival.
That's right? Interesting.
And there's lots of things that factor into this, right?
Yeah.
So number one, let's trip that protection as fast as humanly possible. So there is some validity to your trips being on the source side or as close to the source as possible.
Okay.
Right? There is some validity to that, because it's going to trip the protection faster. It might be marginal. Like if it's 4 spans away, it's not going to make much difference.
Correct.
Right. But if you're taking an outage right from the station, put those grounds right close to the station. You'll generate the fault current much faster, or it'll reach the peak fault current faster and trip that breaker faster. And therefore the exposure time out in the field, to me, it stands to reason that the exposure time is much lower because the circuit's out. Now, that's not all you have to do, of course, right? We need to apply our bonding at the work site. All right. Now, again, like we were talking about, I'm a big fan of remote grounds. I would like to, if at all possible, do not ground at the work site. In my thoughts, bond the work site, especially if it's wood, right?
Okay, this is big, and I want to key on this, because this is what's happening a lot. Like a metric fuck ton out there still is bracket grounding, and like bracket grounding at the work site. So not only are you not equal potential bonding, you're putting your grounds right at the work site. You're doing like essentially like 2 wrong things right at your work site, like what you're saying. So let's hammer on this a little bit, because there's a lot of guys out there just bracket grounding or just grounding and not adding the bond, not adding the cluster bracket to the structure and bonding the structure, bonding in their zone.
Okay, so when you apply a set of grounds, okay, so what here in British Columbia, everything distribution, number 2 is good. Everything from the current limiting reactor at the substation out to the field, everything we do is number 2 for grounds. Why? Okay, so we have you have I know in the United States, OSHA requires 4/0 grounds. I think it's 4/0, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
4/0 for everything. You get a piece of number 6 copper up there, number 4 copper in the air, and you're putting a 4/0 ground on the thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's
safety got a hold of it.
What's that?
Safety got a hold of it.
Perhaps. I mean, OSHA's requiring it. Okay, it is a better ground than a number 2 ground. Oh, but what we're losing here is 4/0 grounds everywhere, every time, all over the place. They are now taking away any kind of critical thinking, and they're taking away the question from the guys in the field. Well, what's my fault current here? Right? So let me ask you, what do you think the withstand rating for 4/0 grounds is?
No idea.
30,000 amps at 30 cycles. Where are you going to see 30,000 amps of fault current? Maybe on a transmission line, but transmission protection operates super fast.
Yeah.
Right. But let's leave the size of the grounds alone. Well, we'll talk about a little bit more first. Number two is good for 10,000 amps. That's the withstand rating at 30 cycles. That's like at 30 cycles, your protection operates 8 to 10 cycles.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you're going to put grounds on somewhere distant from the sub, and it is it's a cutout that's being closed with a fuse. Now your fuse operates extremely fast too, right? So, and don't forget, the amount of fault current way down the line is considerably less. So your number 2 grounds, when you're not right at the work site, your number 2 grounds way far away from the sub are even more than adequate. Mm-hmm. So I mean that's OSHA and whatever, that's fine. I mean, we use number 2 on 500, don't we? Here in this province.
Yep.
Why? Because the protection is that sensitive, it'll trip the circuit out in less than 10 cycles. Right? Mm-hmm. So you take a phase on the 500, we got 500 running all over this province, phase to the tower, bam, that circuit's out like that.
Yeah.
So number 2 is good enough, right? But leave that alone for now, right? So let's get back to the bracket grounding. So you're going to set a 4/0 grounds here, okay?
Yeah.
And they're good for 30,000 amps. And you're going to put you only need 5,000 to 6,000 amps of fault current to trip the protection. But these are now good for 30,000 amps at 30 cycles. Now we put another set out here. Now we've got 60,000 amps of fault current capacity for what? 4 to 5, maybe 6,000 amps of fault current. Okay. You are doing nothing for the worker. Now, if those second set of grounds are right at your work site, you have now split. So if you've got, let's use 10,000 amps, some obscene number. Say you've got 10,000 amps of fault current available. You throw a set of trips on, 4/0 trips. Those 4/0 trips are going to pack it all easily. You throw another set at your work site, you have now just you've cut in half the current through your original trips, and now you've got half of the fault current at your work site, right? Because you've created 2 paths to ground. Your first set of trips, and then the trips at your work site. Okay? Even if you're using a pole band or a cluster bracket at your work site, and you're taking it to the neutral, half the fault current is going to go through that second set of trips.
So is this why you're getting at how you don't like grounding at the work site?
Exactly. Especially on wood structures. Right? I like bonding my work zone and having my grounds elsewhere.
So your grounds can deal with the protection and the system.
Yes.
And your bonding can deal with the worker protection.
That's right.
The
And
bulk of the worker protection.
I'll draw it up. Yeah, the bulk of the worker protection. And it doesn't matter if we use a distro pole because it's just pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But if all we're doing on a transmission pole is we're adding an extra cluster bracket and bonding across, right? But if you've got a system neutral and you've got your 3 phases coming across, right?
Yep.
Cross arm, you've got a pole here. You've got a set of trip grounds, I don't know, whatever, a mile away.
Sure.
Okay. This is where all your fault current's going to go.
Okay.
If you decide you're up on the pole here, workers on the structure here, you bond all 3, take it to your cluster bracket and to the system neutral. Now you've got half the fault current here. Can you see that? Or is it kind of,
it's a little bit in the
let me try this.
In the blinds. But I'm tracking what you're saying. I'm following where you're going with this. And
how's that? Is that better?
I'm not sure how many people have thought about it this way. So this is good.
Is this better?
Yep.
Okay. So now you've got so if this is your source, right?
Yep.
You've got all your fault current here. Forget about this. All your fault current going to here. Your phase to phase is much more reliable anyway, tripping the protection. We throw a phase to ground, it helps, and it also dissipates the energy.
Yep.
Right? Now, we're on the structure here. Forget about the grounds, right? I reach up and touch a phase. Am I not a path to ground here?
You absolutely are.
What is my path to ground?
Through the pole.
Through the pole. And it depends. Is the neutral bonded to the pole or not? Right? If the neutral is just sitting on an insulator like it does in a lot of utilities, my path to ground is my hands through my feet to the bottom of the pole.
Yep.
Depending on how dry this pole is, we have a whole bunch more resistance here, right? The resistance below my feet. Okay. So I've got a huge impedance path there. But I am the only path at my work site. The idea behind putting our bonds on, we take our bonds across. Okay, that's probably not the best. I'm doing this kind of on the fly here.
You're essentially adding, like you're talking about adding a cluster now. You're talking about bonding.
Yeah, so we're going to put our cluster. Okay. Now, there's a couple of things happening here. Any voltage rise is carried out on the line. It's very short, right?
Yep.
Because we're tripping the protection faster than our heartbeats.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So we limit the exposure to us, whether we have these on or not. But as an additional safety, any voltage rise that comes out on this conductor, it comes to here. What we're doing is we're now doing the best we can by taking that voltage rise down to our feet.
Yep.
Okay. So that our hands and our feet are as close together as possible to the same potential. So we're lowering the voltage drop across us.
Yep.
Okay. Another thing we're doing, if we don't bond to the neutral, is our path to ground, right? Because that's what's going to kill us.
Yep.
The impedance, we have all this resistance here, not to here, because that's not grounded to the system anywhere. We have all the resistance down the pole, or the impedance, right? Down the pole to ground. If we put this on here, where's the resistance? This doesn't mean anything. The only resistance is below our feet to the pole band, because that's ground.
So if you're talking about bonding your cluster to the neutral, when you say putting it here, you're talking about bonding cluster to the neutral and essentially grounding your bonded zone right at the at the work site.
That's right. And what you want, the minute you do this now, the impedance below your feet and in your circuit is now considerably less.
Yep.
Right. And fault current's going to flow at the work site as well as over here.
Yep.
Right. The whole thing, and I'm probably not doing the best job explaining it, but you want to increase the impedance of the worker path at the work site,
yep.
the path to ground. What do we do at the substation? We increase it by putting that crushed gravel beneath our feet.
Yep.
We increase it at the work site by having all that wood beneath us. Yep. Now, it doesn't help if there's a ground wire on the pole, and it doesn't help if there's a transformer there. You got to bond it in. You still want to bond your zone.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're saying in some cases still, so like some cases, like if there's a ground on the pole, if there's a transformer on the pole, you're saying it's a good idea to ground your cluster and your
it's going to be grounded anyway.
Okay.
Right.
Good.
Because it's touching something there that's grounded. So you might as well bond it into your zone, right? And hit the neutral. It's there anyway. Just eliminate all potential differences at that site. But if you've got nothing on the structure, you have just a system neutral, or better yet, no neutral at the site.
Yep.
Right. And it's a transmission structure, and you've got a set of trip grounds, 10 spans out of the sub. You now have all the impedance down the pole here, all the impedance in the worker path. You want to keep the higher the impedance in my path as a worker, the better off I am.
Yeah.
And think of it this way. If I'm reaching up to touch the phase, would I be safer if I put a set of class 2 gloves on?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you've increased the impedance.
Exactly. So why not increase it below my feet as well if I can?
Yeah.
Right? Don't try to avoid, you can't always avoid it, right? Because we have pole grounds and we have transformers, and sometimes the neutral's grounded at the structure, or sometimes the neutral's clamped right on the structure.
Yeah.
Right? But I really want guys to think about what are the potential differences. And once we establish the potential differences, how can I increase the impedance in my path and lower the impedance around me?
And this is massive for you guys listening, is take the time to draw this out electrically if you can, or if you can't do that, or you can't remember because it's been ages since you've actually done series, parallel, combination circuits and the math behind this stuff, then get with somebody that's more recent in it. Get with an apprentice. They can probably draw it out better in all due respect, because they've spent less time away from the math than you have. But get with them and draw this out. Draw a guy on a pole, draw 3-phase, draw him making a parallel path with that pole, draw a set of trip grounds, draw a bonded zone, and put some numbers to this. Find out what the numbers are. We're roughly what, rule of thumb, 1,000 ohms of resistance for a human body, something like that. I don't know. Start playing with some numbers and figure this out for yourself, because the math it doesn't lie with this. And not enough people have been trained in this, or they were like way long ago. And not enough people have seen the math. Like, not enough people take the time to do it. They've managed to live 30 years in a trade grounding like this. They just haven't had the right situation yet.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's like, there's any number of things we do out in the field. We'll have if we have a set of remote grounds on a monopole, on a 138, 115 line, or whatever voltage.
Sure.
We've grounded the 3 phases to the steel tower or the steel structure. Okay. Now we've got to put a sleeve in mid-span, and we've got a crane with a man basket. Okay. And half the utilities say, take that truck and ground it drive a ground rod in, and then bond the basket. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, bonding the basket is good because now you're taking that potential around you.
Yep.
Okay. You have now, in effect, the impedance path around you as a worker is extremely low, and the impedance path in you as a worker is higher.
Correct.
But by throwing that ground on the truck, let me ask you this. How much, and typically, you know, in a lot of places, they're going to expect you to measure that ground, try to get below, 8 ohms, 6 ohms, depending on the utility.
Yep.
Now, how about this? What if you put so you've got outriggers down, you got your stiff legs, your outriggers down, you lift that truck off the ground, and just say hypothetically, you put it on rubber blankets and didn't put the ground on.
Mm-hmm.
You've now increased the impedance at the work site.
Yep.
You still have step touch issues, access, egress to the truck for the workers on the ground.
Yep.
But now in the
that
air,
can be mitigated as well.
Yeah, but to me, at the work site now, the amount of fault current that could flow at the work site is considerably less.
Yeah.
Because you've increased the impedance.
Yeah.
By lifting the truck off the ground and putting it on rubber mats or plastic pallets, or I've seen those outrigger pads, you put them on top of wood pads. Don't ground that truck, because you are now at that work site, you have created a low impedance path right to ground. You are now taking fault current at the work site, and you want to avoid that. Does that make sense?
It does. No, it does. And like
a lot of utilities require you to ground that truck.
And I want to make sure that I want to make sure that we get this across too, that like what Dave and I are talking about is a conversation, and we're in no way, shape, or form telling you to go do something that's against what your utility says, your company, procedures and guidelines are. In no way, shape, or form are we telling you. All we want you to do is start thinking about this stuff for yourself and start challenging things that don't seem right, or start challenging status quo, or start challenging things in ways that have been done for years and years and years, but are like an old school way of thinking about it. And there's new technologies, there's new ways of looking at it. Start challenging it and having the conversations with the people that you can have the conversations with. And maybe you can make some changes if the changes need to be made. We're not telling you today to just go and start doing things that are against, company policy or something like that. I just want to make sure, or OSHA or anything like that. That is not at all. We just want you to start thinking differently when it needs to be done.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I want the guys to think about what they're doing. What are they trying to accomplish? Well, the greater the impedance in the worker path to ground, the lower the amount of current that's going to flow.
Yeah.
It's math. It's simple math. Putting an EPZ or our so-called EPZ, bonding those three phases to around our feet, but not to ground. Don't ground at our work site. Just bond everything at our work site, if at all possible. What we're doing is we're not allowing the fault current to flow at the work site.
Yeah.
Or maybe as little as possible. We want all the fault current to flow through the trips, and we want it to trip the protection as fast as possible. At our work site, we want to increase the impedance in the worker path. It's like me throwing on a set of class 2 gloves and grabbing the phase while I'm up on a pole.
Yeah. Right.
The next best thing would be insulated boots, standing on a pole work platform or a baker board.
Yep.
I don't know what do they call it down there?
Yeah, baker board. Yeah.
Baker board, a fiberglass baker board. Are you not safer on a fiberglass baker board than standing on the pole grabbing a phase?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You've got, what's the shortest baker board? 4 feet,
yep.
5 feet. You get out the end of a 10-foot baker board. Mind you, you've got your yo-yo or your retractable holding you back to the pole. right? If it's not polyester, if it's metal, which is another issue, but again, you've increased the impedance in the worker path.
Yeah.
Right. And you want to increase that impedance. You want to lower the other purpose, I think, and it's really important that we understand that, is we're taking any voltage rise that comes out on the system. So when you run the math, if you can trip that protection extremely fast, you don't get the voltage rise.
Yeah.
You don't get a full line voltage, 12 kV or 25 kV out on the line. It can't get up high enough. Whatever does get out there to us is taking around us to below our feet, so that we rise up as best as possible. We rise up. The potential difference has been taken around us.
Yep.
But we still are that parallel path, no matter what anybody says.
Yeah.
So we're trying to increase the impedance in our path to a point where the voltage drop across us is
survivable.
Yeah. It's survivable. It's negligible. Yeah. So what is it? So the other part of this is, what kind of voltage does it take to drive current through a human body? What does it take to pierce the skin?
Yeah. Well, it's there's going to be variables to that. Like so many, right? Like, are you sweating? Are you dehydrated? Is it a dry day? Humidity? There's so many factors.
Yeah, no, exactly. So these Beagle-Meyer and Lee have done studies on this, and basically, in dry areas, I don't know is Texas a humid place? It's pretty humid.
It changes depending on where you're at, but yeah, it's humid. Yeah.
Okay, so in a humid place, and if you're sweating, it's only going to take up to 25 volts AC to pierce the skin for the voltage. All you need is voltage to drive current through the body.
Yep.
So it takes 25 volts AC in a wet, humid place. Okay, so and in a dry area, you're looking at 50 volts AC.
That's like that would be like standing on ground, like a good solid ground. It would take 25 volts to
pierce the skin.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Well, 25 volts AC.
Yeah.
We're not talking DC. DC, we're looking at about 120 volts DC before we start to the threshold of feeling it, right? But that's what's going to drive current through us. So again, when we build our EPZ or when we bond around us, we're taking that voltage rise around us, and in our work site, we are now there's a number of things happening here, right? We want in our circuit as high an impedance as possible, around us as low an impedance as possible. The other thing that we want to do is we want to take that voltage rise around us and therefore minimize the voltage drop across us as workers.
Yep.
So if we can get the voltage rise in our so-called EPZ down below 25 volts, we'll be safe anyway. So there's a number of things happening all at the same time, and I don't think that is explored enough.
Yeah.
Right? I think it begs the question, what are we trying to accomplish and how are we going to accomplish it?
Yeah.
These hard and fast, anyway, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to say is it seems like it's an area of a billion opinions without any like actual studies placed behind it, like real science placed behind it. You know what I mean? It seems like grounding and bonding, it seems to just be like a place of a billion opinions versus actual real hard data science. Like it's becoming more and more people are doing, experiments and trying to run tests and trying to come up with actual hard data to back up what they're saying. But I think for a long time, it's just been opinions on what might work.
I agree. A lot of those opinions. So let's turn it around a bit. What are the typical accidents that are going to happen to us? What is going to cause us problems? Where why do we need to apply grounds, and why do we need to bond our work zone? Grounds are to trip the protection. So why? Accidental re-energization. What's going to kill us? Okay, we ground, everybody's throwing, they're grounding every single day.
Yeah.
The reason we bond our work zone is because of accidental energization, or what another big one is a high induction corridor, right? So we're going to bond our work zones in a high induction corridor. So accidental re-energization, somebody closing a switch that they shouldn't have, while it can happen, and it does, it's extremely rare. So we get this, as linemen, I think we get this false sense of safety because we've grounded 1,000 times and they've never helped us.
Yeah.
Because nobody's accidentally re-energized the line.
Yep.
Right. I know of, in my career, I know of one crew, you know the guy,
yep,
who was re-energized on a 60 line.
Yep.
Right. Because of an accidental switching. Right, or switching the incorrect switch.
Yeah.
I mean, although it does happen, that's why we ground, and that's why we bond our work zones, for those rare instances. Okay, so what else do we bond for? Back or ground, backfeed, storm is a big one. You know, you get a lot of customers don't have proper transfer switches in their homes. They'll hook up a generator. Okay, what's your fault? The available fault current. Throw up your trips. You still bond your work zone, always. But you throw up a set of trips, a customer's got a 3,500 watt generator. And if they're backfeeding 3,500 watts through a 25 kVA transformer, your available fault current there is 6 amps on the high side, relative to, you know, say 10,000 on the outside from a substation.
Yeah.
So 3,500 watt generator does, you know, backfeeding through a transformer, your grounds are going to burn everything off.
Yeah.
As long as you get your grounds up, you're pretty safe, because again, it's ratios, right? 10,000 amps of fault current. We have our number 2 grounds, or we have our grounds in place, and we have a bonded work zone. The differential there is so extreme that the trips are going to take everything. Your bonded work zone, negligible. You'll see negligible. Now you take the same ratios and dump it down to 6 amps of fault current, and on your load side from one customer backfeeding and a set of trips, now it's the same ratios. The amount of current at your work site in a bonded zone is almost immeasurable, right?
Yeah.
Not measurable. So I don't know. To do this properly you need to do the math with a group of people, right? Take them through the process. Right now, we have a set of hard and fast rules that typically most utilities follow. You have a set of grounds, and you have a bonded work zone. A lot of utilities are following that.
Yeah.
But I just want the guys to think about what is going on at their work site.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it's hugely important, because people, from what I hear in the industry, I hear a lot of stuff, whether it's through this platform and on social media, or it's through the people I work with on a daily basis, coming to me and talking to me about grounding and bonding and what they've seen for general practices happening in the industry right now. And I don't think linemen actually understand it. Like, it's something they've done either for a long time, or it's just what they've been shown, but I don't think they're getting what's actually happening electrically, or what could happen electrically. And grounding and bonding, like, everyone thinks working a de-energized line is so safe because it's de-energized, right? It has, it doesn't have that potential, but it has the potential for potential. And grounding incidences or working on de-energized lines kills more people in this country than working on energized lines does, than working lines hot. There's less electrical contact incidences than there are grounding de-energized incidences today.
Okay.
happening.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see the stats on that. Those are hard stats to come by, right? I think because of litigation, everything kind of gets settled out of court. You never know really what happened.
Sure.
To me, again, I think like we have enough exposure when we're doing energized work.
We can agree that it's as dangerous as working it hot.
Yeah.
I think we could easily agree that but everyone treats it as, oh, it's just de-energized. It's fine. I'm good. I'll just throw a set of grounds up somewhere and then I'll go work the line and I'll be fine. And they haven't seen the math.
We've done that for decades,
mm-hmm.
right? Not now, but previously when I first started out, the pole band, the cluster bracket, the EPZ was just starting out. And I remember, nobody knew where to put the thing when it first came out. Because of course, back in the 80s, we never had a lot of training, right? Not in the private sector anyway. Yeah. So, we've come a long way. I still think we have a long way to go to where we want to be, right? So
that's why I like these conversations. Is I just want the people listening, and I'm not trying to challenge anybody and get anybody frustrated or mad or go, oh, fucking listen to this guy. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I've done it like this for years. I just want you to think different. You know what I mean? I want you to look at it and think about it again and go and talk to people about it and do the math and challenge the status quo, challenge what's been done for generations. Maybe it is the right way. Because I'm not saying I'm not saying what we're even talking about is the exact right way. I'm just saying challenge it. Go out and ask these questions. Take it to your leadership.
Yeah, don't just accept it because this is how we're supposed to do it, or these are the rules. Exactly. Ask the questions. Rationalize. Like you're telling me to cluster ground or bracket ground, sorry. Okay, rationalize that to me. Okay, I got a set of trips here that are more than enough to trip the protection, because that's what it's designed to do. Now I want to put another set over here, and that's going to take half the fault current, because there's only so much fault current available, right? There's only so much current available. There's a current limiting reactor at the station. That typically limits the amount of current that can go out to the field, right? So there's only so much current available. Throwing on another set of grounds, all it does is now you've got fault current at another location. You take a third set of grounds and now you've divided the fault current into roughly thirds. So I want guys to think about the trip protection for tripping the circuit, but tripping the circuit as fast as possible. That has the effect of limiting the voltage rise out to wherever you are working. Additionally, you're bonding your work zone to take that voltage rise around your feet. Additionally, you want to increase the impedance in your worker path as high as possible, and so that the path to ground is your trips, not you. Okay, so you take that voltage. There's a number of things that we're trying to accomplish. Tripping the protection fast so that the time we're exposed to a lethal current is limited. Get it below that heartbeat length. Mm-hmm. Get that voltage rise where at our work site, get it so it goes around us, not through us, or get it to go around us get as much to go around us so that the voltage rise through us or across us, I should say, is as low as possible. Low enough that it doesn't pierce the skin or, go through the human body. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to accomplish with our equal potential zone. We want to limit the voltage drop through us as workers. If we get the voltage drop below 25 volts, you're not going to drive current through the human body. And there's negligible current there anyway, because it's all being taken up elsewhere by your trips. right? And I guess that's what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to focus on, right? It'd be so much easier other than a 1 hour conversation and a couple
No,
of
this is great though, because it's conversation, and it's conversations that not enough people listen to. Like there's not everybody has access to these kinds of conversations to start even thinking differently about it. It's concepts and ideas that they maybe haven't even heard. They don't discuss on their day-to-day as a crew. They're doing other jobs, other work, and they're not thinking about these things. And so this sparks those other conversations. It's good. It's perfect, because they can go out. There's people out there's so many people like yourself that know a lot about this and would love to have these conversations and love to make change and create change in the industry, and educate and teach linemen about the grounding and bonding. So hopefully this can happen. This can spark some of that. That's the other thing that touching on too is you talk about grounding at the work site. So bringing that ground to the actual earth, to the crew that's around the ground, and how dangerous of a situation that can create. So I like what you're saying as well, is like, get your grounds away from the entire work site, not just what's happening on the structure, but what's happening on the ground as well. Like you talked about crane trucks being grounded, like you're bringing that down to the ground, to the people working down there as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really, really good point, right? We like grounding the crane at the work site now brings any ground potential rise or any potential rise to the workers on the ground. The more we can increase the impedance there, you still have access egress issues to the truck, while the worker is bonded to the phase in the man basket, right, and the crane or the crane or whatever.
That can be mitigated though. That
can easily be managed by a platform, insulated platform. That's much easier to manage than driving a ground rod in at the work site, and now you've got fault current flowing at the work site as well as where your remote trips are. Try to limit the amount of current that can flow at the work site and the amount of potential rise and drop, obviously, at the work site. Yeah. So, and that's, I just want people to kind of think about it, right? Now, you can't always do these things. Like you get a 3-pole double dead end where you've got a couple bridles and 8 down guys. Yeah. If you don't have those epoxy insulators in the guys, or what are they, those fiberglass links? Yep. If you've got a straight guy wire in a lot of structures that, they've got bonding, you've got no choice, right? You've got grounds at the work site. I don't care what anybody says.
Well, at least make sure that you're putting cones near these, like some sort of visual barriers, like burying them off, like
absolutely
including those in your tailgate discussions, your pre-job discussions, like letting people know about that hazard, because it is a hazard. It's a real big hazard.
It's a huge hazard, and it's a struggle sometimes. Some of your work site, you're going to have a lot of paths to ground that you have to manage or control. And that's a challenge, right? But again, I honestly think having a set of remote trips is by and large far better for the worker, and of course a bonded work zone at the work site. With it, try to not to have your trips at your work site. Right. Those are my thoughts, and there is some validity to having those trips closer to the station, because you want to generate a higher fault current, which trips the protection faster, right? And limits the faster that protection operates, the lower the potential rise. Like if you're at 8 cycles and you run the math, I don't think you don't get that high a voltage rise. Because it can't rise up that fast to get to line potential. So because the trips trip the protection out faster, that limiting that voltage rise, to me, is one of the best things we can do.
really limits the voltage rise across the body if it's your body that's in
Yeah.
making
So
that path.
so where we are at the work site,
Yeah.
what else can we do? Maybe this is the question to ask all the time. If I'm up in an EPZ, am I a parallel path? You are always a parallel path.
Absolutely.
So if I throw a set of class 2 or class 3 rubber gloves on, am I safer? Absolutely I am. Because now I've increased the impedance to the point of mega ohms, right? Millions of ohms with the rubber gloves on my arm.
Yeah.
So I've now increased the impedance in my path relative to the path around me. I've made myself safer. Now I don't want to, like in some utilities do this. They expect you to, wear your gloves when you're in an EPZ.
Yeah.
They still expect that, which is safer.
But is it taking it too far?
Is it taking it too far?
Is it necessary? That's a
is it necessary?
Good question to ask as well.
Or is there other negative impacts of wearing gloves in an EPZ that are making it worse, right? So that kind of thing. But those are my thoughts on all of this, right?
I like it, Dave. I appreciate. Is there anything else you want to touch on? We've been hammering on grounding and bonding for an hour, and that's usually about the threshold for anybody listening to stay engaged with it. So
there is one thing I'd like to have another podcast about it. Is incident precursors. I think we've talked about this briefly, but one of the things I notice, and we'll leave this we'll unpack this another time. But
sure.
But I'd like the guys out there to start thinking about it. So, okay, there are and I do a lot of incident investigations. So there's a lot of precursors that kind of foretell an incident that is going to happen, right? A lot of times we recognize the precursors. We recognize them after the incident happened. It's like, oh yeah, I thought something wasn't right.
Yep.
But they kept on anyway. You could, if you are hearing, you're driving down the road and you're hearing something banging away and you just, screw it. You just keep going. And then suddenly your trailer goes whipping past you.
Yep.
Right? Or you feel some sort of a vibration when you're driving and you don't stop to check it out. You know something's not quite right. And then all of a sudden one of your wheels goes whipping past you, right? Or goes flying off your vehicle, any number of things. And then the other side of it I want to, as part of this is how many times have you gone by in your career, walked by something and you're like, oh shit, thank God I caught that. You prevent an incident, you catch something, you prevent it, but you don't think after you've prevented it, you carry on about your day like nothing's happened. We don't realize the significance of the incident we just prevented.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk about recognizing the precursors to incidents and then dealing with them instead of, whenever I do these incident investigations, most of the time there is something somebody noticed that they recognized it, but they failed to address it.
Yeah.
And it bit them in the ass down the road. It's like, yeah, I know that could be a problem instead of just dealing with it.
It's going to be good. It's going to be a good conversation. I'd be interested to see what you have to say about that. Cause I think a lot, this is where my mind goes anyway, but I think a lot of what we could talk about might be perceived as something like a little bit fluffy as well. Like the sixth sense type of thing as well. But this is something that I think humans should talk about a little bit more, is that sixth sense, like that gut feeling even, or paying attention, and like you were talking about paying attention to those noises, those sounds. It's like, using all of your senses to really like think about what's happening in any given situation or any given point in time, because you're right. Like how many incidences could be prevented?
Well, I think a lot of our guys have been in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking back, when you're on an exercise or and you're in a combat zone, I know a lot of our guys, a lot of linemen have been in combat. I've met a bunch in Whiskey City there. We were at the rodeo a few years back. So there's a lot of guys that have seen that side of things. And how in tune are they to their environment? Their spatial awareness, their situational awareness is on hyperdrive.
Yeah.
And when we get back home or when we do line work, we get into, I wouldn't say a complacent world, but we've been doing this so long. It's like, oh yeah, whatever. That happens all the time, right? And then suddenly something slightly different, the same scenario, but something slightly different happens. We kind of recognize it as an issue, but we don't deal with it. Or we're like, yeah, I'm too busy to check that. Or, fuck, I don't want to get out of the truck and check the trailer hitch, or I don't know, whatever. My load isn't secure, right? Mm-hmm. Or I'm pulling too hard on the pole on a boom before I bend a cylinder or do something, right? Like there are precursors. There are little warning lights all the time. We do or don't recognize them. A lot of times we do recognize them after the incident occurred. We think back on it in hindsight. Yeah, I felt the truck was a little bit wobbly, or I felt the truck was clunking, but I didn't do anything about it until too late. Yeah. So those precursors, how do we recognize them, stop and deal with them right away? And I think that would be a really good conversation to have too.
I dig it, man. Let's do it. We'll line it up.
You bet.
I'll prepare for that one a little bit more. Well, thanks, Dave. It's always an awesome conversation talking to you. And thanks for taking the time to be on the show again.
You bet. You take care, Ryan, and enjoy yourself down there. Enjoy the weather.
I am. It's another thing that I really love about Texas. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna move here, like everyone else on the planet.
Yeah, it's driving home prices up, I bet.
Well, I hope I got you guys thinking a little bit differently about grounding and bonding. Thanks, Dave, for coming back on the show and having that conversation with me. It's a tough conversation to have sometimes. And like I said, like maybe everything that we're saying is completely off the wall and wrong, but I just hope that it gets you guys questioning and thinking differently about it and searching out those answers on your own, because it's an important subject. We all want to go home. At the end of the day, we all want to go home, and we don't want a grounding issue to be the thing that takes us off this planet. So I hope you guys can stay safe and start thinking differently about that. All right, enough said about grounding and bonding for now. This is the part of the show where you get to learn about how you can support Powerline Podcast and how you can keep this thing going and help me build this. So you can visit powerlinepodcast.com, and by doing that, you can visit the store. The store has hats and t-shirts and hoodies and stickers and all kinds of great stuff that I've worked really hard to try to get you guys quality gear and gear that looks great and gear that I'd want to wear and that I think that you would want to wear. So visit Powerline Podcast store. That's powerlinepodcast.com. Visit the store. Everything on there, super simple to get. I'll get that out to you as fast as I can. Another thing that I'm super proud of is the resume course that I built. It's super cheap, $33 Canadian, so really inexpensive for you American guys. And I know I get it every time I put the post out on social media. I get, oh, you mean signing the books? A journeyman ticket is okay. I get it. Yes, when you sign the books at the Union Hall and you get called out, you don't need to produce a resume. But there is a lot of utilities asking for resumes. Anytime you want a different position other than just a journeyman lineman, like you want to become some sort of supervisor, management, or anything like that, you're going to need to produce a resume. All right. If you're just a kid getting into the trade for the first time, people want to see what your history is. They want to see what your certifications are. They want to see see what climbing schools you've gone to, where you've possibly worked before. If you've been out of the military, they want to see this stuff. So I put together about an hour's worth of content after being in various levels of resource management, dealing with union line workers for more than 5 years. I've read thousands of resumes, seen thousands of resumes, hired hundreds of guys, and I put all that I learned into about an hour of content to share with you guys, because I constantly get that question. So you can find that as well on powerlinepodcast.com. It's a simple download. Just go up top right corner, hit the drop down. You'll see online courses. Click that, get the course. It will take your resume game to the next level. All right, enough said on that. Be your brother's keeper, guys. Please go home to your families each and every day. Play safe, and by all means, reach out to me on social if you have any questions about this. If you want to get connected with Dave, get connected with other people that know things about these subjects, I can help make that happen for you. Just reach out. I'm most active on Instagram and TikTok, so get on there, reach out, and yeah. All right, guys. Thanks. Appreciate all of you. Play safe.